Jeff, did you stay up late and watch the Midnight Special when you were a kid?
I didn't even know what that was. Good to have you guys here. I stayed up late watching sitcoms, but just like John, we listened to music, but it wasn't a big part of my life. I think people they're either influenced by music, and it's a big part of how they relax and how they think, or it isn't. I've noticed that with a lot of my friends. If you ask me a lot of these like popular culture questions, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Couldn't do it. Mr. Gilstrap, would you like to introduce our next guest?
Well, that's the voice of Jeffrey James Higgins, author and an expert on a lot of things, not the least of which is narco-terrorism, which is kind of what I think we're going to talk about today.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I like that, John. Is an expert in a lot of things. I know some stuff. Other things, not so much.
Oh, come on. You did a lot of secret squirrel work and kicked a lot of doors and arrested a lot of bad guys, particularly in the area of narco-terrorism.
No, I did. I had a lot of experience in narco-terrorism. I actually made the first narco-terrorism case that got us the narco-terrorism law. Spent a lot of time pushing my agency into that nexus between terrorism and narcotics trafficking, so they take it seriously. So there's a huge percentage of terrorist groups are using drugs to finance themselves.
You were DEA.
Yeah, I was DEA, and I was one of the first people to get to the World Trade Center when it came down on 9/11, and I decided to do nothing but terrorism after that. But we were a single mission agency, and a lot of single mission agencies don't want to get pulled into the slippery slope of having to worry about terrorism or other laws. But honestly, I was doing everything I could to get involved. I was on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, investigating Operation Pent Bomb right after 9/11, and then I was one of our liaisons, DA's liaisons to the Department of Homeland Security right after it was formed. And all the intelligence from around the world that was coming in about threats to the homeland were coming into this one center that I was in, and a huge percent of it were touching on transnational criminal organizations, drug trafficking groups that DEA had infiltrated. So like right away, I saw that the human sources that DEA had developed around the world gave us really great insight into this, and then spent years like sharing that intelligence and trying to show the nexus, and sitting in meetings with like high-ranking intelligence officials who are telling me that there's no relation between narcotics and terrorism.
Yeah, but you were also
to the point where we got the law passed.
Weren't you also strapping up and going down and actually meeting the sources at their sources, like where the stuff was being made, and getting the bad guys in the process?
Yeah. I was trying to get into the game for a long time, and I ended up going to Afghanistan. I helped stand up our office there. I was the assistant country attaché for over a year, and then I joined our FAST teams, which were our foreign tactical teams. And they'd drop us into these, remote areas, like in border regions. And I spent about over 3 years in Afghanistan, and I'd be co-located with the Operation Detachment Alpha guys, our Green Berets, and I'd live with them, and we'd stand up source networks. So we'd go out in the field and build up forces, and then we'd actually action them. So I had, at some operations, I had close to 100 foreign troops under me, and we'd go out and hit these targets. So our focus was really high-value targets, and for me personally, especially, they were all terrorism related. So it was if we were trying to put up a deck, it would be a terrorist who then had some kind of nexus to drugs, so we could legally do it.
Which brings us to Venezuela, Jeffrey.
Yes.
So I dropped in on a 60 Minutes episode this week, and they had sent a crew to Venezuela, and they showed the video of these boats getting zapped instantaneously out of the water, boats that they allege are running drugs into the United States. We've had you on the program before, and you mentioned that it is quite likely in those waters, with what those boats are doing, that they are indeed trafficking large amounts of drugs into the country. Can you go into a bit more detail as to how you can make that statement with confidence?
Sure. Well, first, just kind of taking a step back and looking at that, I find it really interesting. And I hear this from my friends all the time. I'm in the D.C. area, right? So a lot of my friends are, have Trump derangement syndrome. Anything the administration does, they're just automatically against. But I ask a lot of them, like, when you're demanding evidence about a specific attack or something, did you do that when Biden was doing drone strikes in Yemen? Did you do that when we were doing naval bombardment against the Houthis? Did you ask for that to see that evidence then, or did you just assume because the government was saying it was there that it was there? And I'm libertarian, as I've told you guys before, so I'm very distrustful of government on all levels. But the fact that we're not believing that we're somehow thinking these are recreational craft or fishermen seems crazy to me. And the reasons are, I mean, I worked a little bit in the Caribbean. Most of my work was going after radical Islamic terrorism and these other transnational criminal groups. But I did some work down there, and like Southcom. We have a lot of intelligence agencies, we have a lot of military assets, and we have a lot of federal law enforcement, and they're in that area. And when we're intercepting phone calls, we have big data that we're sifting through. We have a really good window on what's happening on the water down there. And we have human sources. So, all the time, like when I was down there, I did some work in Honduras. We had our tactical team down there. We would see these tracks. We knew where they were coming from. We had information on the other end. It wasn't like a Carnival cruise coming out of Venezuela. Like we knew it. We knew based on the intelligence we had that it was a drug boat and they were coming towards the U.S. Problem is they don't just like leave a port and come right to the U.S. They'll meet other boats at sea. They'll split up loads among many ships. They'll stop at transshipment points. I did a lot of work when I was based in New York with drugs coming through the Dominican Republic. They'll come up and then move to land and then come up closer to the U.S. and back to sea. So I have complete confidence if the government's telling me that these were the boats they identified as narco-terrorism boats. But having said that, they need to show this evidence to Congress. So I'm fully behind them going after these boats, but we need to have transparency at least with Congress. If they're using classified systems or whatever, it doesn't necessarily need to be made public, but they're legally required, right, to notify Congress when they're using military assets, and I don't believe they've been complying with that, and that's a problem.
Are the drugs being manufactured in Venezuela, or is Venezuela being used as the middle ground?
It's both. If we're talking about like, there's a vast array of drugs that are coming out of Central and South America that are coming into the U.S. And the ones that are really the most damaging, like, as a libertarian, I think you can make a compelling argument to legalize most drugs. And I think it's a horrible life choice for people. And but you can save money. You can keep people out of prison. I mean, I think they will destroy their lives with these drugs. And you see it time and time again. But you can make a compelling argument the government shouldn't be doing things. But there are certain drugs that are so strong that they have these negative externalities. And the whole, like, opioid family is one of them. Fentanyl is something like 50 times stronger than heroin, right? Super strong, super deadly. We see the stuff that's coming into the country. It's just pure poison. As soon as it hits your bloodstream, you're dead. Carfentanil is, they have all these analogs. So, like, we'll make a law and we'll say, okay, this specific substance is illegal. And then the chemist will just tweak a couple of molecules, and it's a different substance with the same effects, but it's technically not illegal. So we have an analog law, which I actually have a lot of problems with too. So they make some different similar substances, and things like carfentanil that were developed. I think it was originally developed as a weapon of mass destruction. It's like 10,000 times more dangerous than morphine. It's more potent, stronger, and these things have. And I talk about negative externalities. If you take a bag of fentanyl and dump it on the subway, you're going to kill everybody on that subway. It's really a problem. So I think when these types of drugs, if we're talking about mostly the opioids, I think it's a different conversation than if you're talking about like a cargo ship with a hold filled with marijuana, for example. It's a different discussion.
Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, maintains his innocence in any drug trafficking and says, if anything, this is just stuff that's moving through the eye and I got no control over this. Any chance that he is right?
No. There's plenty of evidence that the governments are complicit. I mean, here's the problem with like drug trafficking. They create these shadow economies everywhere you see it. And I did a lot of research on this years ago, like on organized crime in various countries around the world, and the UN has some really detailed reports on this. Everywhere you have these shadow economies as they grow up, they destabilize governments. And that's even without the violence. The violence does more than anything. But just the fact that there's these billions of dollars moving through countries that are operating outside of the legitimate, it's an illicit economy that operate outside of these legitimate structures really have a destabilizing effect. And wherever that happens, there's like deep levels of corruption. So Venezuela's, they're not a friend of the United States. And a lot of these places, and I've actually arrested these types of narco traffickers. They talk about using just the drug sales by itself as like a tool of war. Why wouldn't they want to destabilize the United States? Why wouldn't they want to cause chaos? And when you're looking, it's not even Venezuela. Venezuela is a small country. It's a problem for us, but it's not that big a problem. China, on the other hand, is where like a lot of these opioids are coming from, and China sends drugs through Central and South America all the time. Like they do it in a bunch of different ways. They send pure loads of processed like opioids. They send pill machines and the basic components so they can be manufactured in places like Mexico and then brought up across the border. I mean, China's been doing this for years, and they've been playing a game with us where they pretend that they're making it illegal, and they will make some drugs illegal. Every now and then they will extradite somebody but it's a massive, China controls the opioid market across the world. And they're obviously doing this as a geopolitical tool, as a way to destabilize the United States. They're making huge amounts of money off of it, and it's not only causing us chaos with 100,000 plus like opioid deaths a year, but they're making us spend inordinate amounts of money on like law enforcement and clogging up our court systems and causing domestic problems and social problems with these things are so addictive. So, whether Maduro himself is he's greenlighting things, and I believe there's evidence out there that he has been, why wouldn't he? And it's not just him; it's these other countries as well. I mean, this is a tool of warfare, and I think it's important for people to understand that.
Also, isn't it a mistake just to concentrate on Venezuela? We got Colombia is now officially our friend, but Colombia is not really our friend. Are they?
Yeah. No, I completely. I guess that's yes. I 100% agree with that. These drugs, it's all the source countries, it's all the transshipment countries, it's governments that are not. Maybe they're narco states where they're completely run and profiting directly from the drugs, or maybe they're just allowing it to happen, or maybe they don't have the ability to stop it. Whatever's happening, these are coming from a lot of places. So. And by the way, this is an unintended outcome, like you'll see. Everyone gets so fixated in politics on like one little thing. If we go all in, right, and we're blowing up narco boats every day and we're just shutting down the sea channels, they're just going to shift, right? So now the stuff will be coming across the border. But that's what interdiction is. Then you have to beef that up, But the drugs, they're flying stuff across with drones. They're bringing stuff in on commercial airlines. They're having pleasure craft, coming out of Acapulco and coming into the U.S. They're tunneling under the wall. There's so many ways. We do a pretty robust trade across that southern border. And I've seen drugs in the weirdest stuff. Like you can actually take like cocaine and mix it with a substance so it doesn't destroy the effects of the cocaine, and mold like plaster sculptures out of it. I've seen like children's toys made of cocaine, and then when it comes across, like if you're a customs official and you open up a box and you see a bunch of these like pink piglets, and you're like, oh, these are children's toys or something to put on some kind of tchotchke to put on a shelf. Then when they come in, they take it, they dissolve it, they put it through a quick process, and they have cocaine. So it's really, really hard to stop. It's impossible to stop, but you can limit how much of it's coming through.
Matt Miller.
So my thought in this whole process is, okay, we take out a boat, all right, that stops that shipment from coming in, but it doesn't get to the source. There'll be another boat, and we have to take that one out. Why is it so hard to get to the source and be able to stop it where it starts?
So that is a great question, and what you just said is sort of what I was trying to do for most of my career. And DEAs in general, going back to the 70s, was looking at trying to find these massive organizations that kind of operate as umbrella groups and work together. And that was sort of the concept, and it's really true. So like I remember I had a meeting with a DEA administrator probably 10 years ago, and I told him, why are we seizing drugs? Like, what's the point? Like, they just make more, right? They grow more, they manufacture more. I'm like, we need to be completely dismantling these organizations, which of course is one of the missions of DEA. But if your metrics are how many drugs you seize, in some ways, the more drugs you seize, the more you're failing, because you're showing how many more drugs are being produced, right? So what you're doing, you have to completely identify and then dismantle these organizations. And in places like Venezuela or Colombia or places where you have governments that may not fully be working with you, that's a problem. Like in my whole career was narcoterrorism, right? So the same thing is true for terrorism. Like right after 9/11, when Osama bin Laden fled into Pakistan, I'm like, I was telling people we have to go in. Like we can't have Pakistan sort of cooperating with us. We need to go in and wipe out Al Qaeda, and we didn't do that, and it was a problem for decades. And I think you see the same thing with these drug groups. If you don't get rid of the government, or if you don't address the government, whether it's boycotts or pressures, however you want to do it, doesn't have to be militarily. If you're not putting pressure on these governments that are allowing it to happen, and if you're not going after the actual groups by taking out like the entire leadership structure, and that's what I did for most of my career. We'd take the top guys and we'd go, there's a money laundering group, there's a weapons trafficking group, there's a human trafficking group, there's the actual smugglers, there's the production group, like there's all these different elements within a transnational criminal organization. And you have to like decapitate the top of it. Now, because there's a demand, and a huge demand, the U.S. has most of the world's demand of drugs, somebody else will just step into that void. So, it's a temporary measure, but it's like catching a murderer. You're not going to end murder, but you've ended that murderer, right? Like he's in jail now. You've incapacitated him. And that's sort of the same philosophy. So you're 100% right. You need to get this stuff at the root.
But hasn't it changed? You talk about there's a huge demand for drugs in America. Okay, fine. That's the junkie on the street with the needle hanging out of his arm. But the new drugs that you're talking about, the hyper drug for what else to call it, those are weapons of war. Those are weapons of mass destruction, and they have a different purpose. So is this a case of? There's a great scene in The Untouchables where Elliot Ness and Sean Connery's character, we know where it is. We just need to go and break it up. We now have the will to go and break it up. Is that where we are right now? Are we kind of picking low-hanging fruit at this point? We've known for years where the bad stuff is being done, and we just need to wipe it out? Or are these guys really well hidden, and we're still trying to figure it out?
No, we know the countries where this is coming from. We know who the major groups are. A lot of them are being protected by foreign governments. A lot of them are in places where the government, like I mentioned Pakistan earlier, and they're like northwest frontier territories, the border regions. They don't necessarily have the rule of law there. So when they go in, they have to go in with the army in their own country. So it's sometimes the countries themselves want to cooperate but can't. But often because of this corruption, and you're talking billions and billions of dollars that are being made here. Especially if you're in the developing world someplace, you're talking about that level of money. I mean, it's insane. I arrested a guy, a bunch of really large narco traffickers. One of them that we convicted in D.C. was responsible for 19.7% of the world's heroin. Think of the amount of money that this guy could wield. I think we got a judgment for like $143 million or something that we were allowed to seize, which we could never find. But the money's insane. So when you're going into some of these like poorer countries, poorer regions within countries, and you're able to throw around money that people will never be able to see, you can completely take over. You become a de facto government in some ways. So I wouldn't call it low. I mean, hitting a ship, low-hanging fruit, there's some drugs, we're going to blow it up. But addressing these countries that are directly responsible, I think that is the path forward. I mean, I think we should use the full weight and force of the U.S. government to stop these people. And we haven't mentioned it, but there's a big difference between just a narco-trafficking group and a terrorist group, right? I think the Trump administration would be in a dangerous place, even if we're calling drugs like a war, if he was just going after drug groups. But if it's and we could change the law, but under the current laws, I think his only legal footing really is if they've been declared a terrorist organization. And legitimately, all these big organizations are terrorist organizations. The things they do are like right out of like Aesop's fables or Grimm's fairy tales. Like, it's unbelievable. Boiling people in water, skinning people alive, burning people in cages. Right? They're really, really dangerous people. So when he designates these cartels and these various groups as terrorist groups, I think it should have been done 20 years ago. Once you do that, now these are terrorists. So I think, a lot of the people who are, shrieking and screaming about this going on have to understand, first, should we stop the drugs? Yes. Should we stop the terrorists? Yes. Now, how do you do it? Like, is lethal force justified? And if it is, do we want to put our own people at risk outside of our 12-mile limits, right? It's like, do we want to put our people at risk on the open seas someplace or in foreign countries? I spent my whole career developing prosecutable cases in foreign countries because I really believe in transparency of the law, but it's very hard to gather the evidence you need when you're in austere places. You don't have the support of the host governments. It's very difficult. And then,
Jeff, I got 10 seconds to get to a commercial break, so I want to thank you very much for your time this morning.